The restaurant's outdoor seating was lively, filled with people enjoying their meals under the warm afternoon sun. Among them sat a man in a simple black jacket, his dark hair slightly tousled. He was quietly sipping his coffee, blending into the crowd, when suddenly, a sharp yelp cut through the air. The sound was followed by cruel laughter. Heads turned, and a few gasps rippled through the diners. Across the street, a large, burly biker smirked as he withdrew his boot. A small dog lay on the pavement, trembling, whimpering in pain. The biker chuckled as if it was just a joke, just another careless action in a day filled with arrogance. The man in the black jacket slowly stood up, placing his cup down with deliberate care. His sharp eyes locked onto the scene, his jaw tightening. No one else dared to intervene, but he couldn't just sit back. He took a deep breath, his hands curling into fists as he crossed the street. The biker had no idea who he had just angered. He had no idea that the quiet man watching him with cold fury wasn't just another passerby. He had just kicked Keanu Reeves' dog. Hey there, before we dive back into the story, let us know where you're watching from. If you love stories like this one, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We've got another amazing story coming your way tomorrow. Keanu reached the sidewalk just as the biker took another step toward the dog. The poor animal flinched, its tiny body curling inward in fear. The biker laughed again, seemingly amused at the creature's helplessness. What's the matter, mutt? Can't take a little fun? He sneered. Keanu's voice was low, steady, but there was a weight to it that made people stop and listen. Step away from the dog. The biker turned, raising an eyebrow. His smirk didn't fade. And who do you think you are? Keanu didn't answer right away. Instead, he knelt down beside the dog, gently running his fingers over its fur, checking for injuries. The little animal whined but didn't resist his touch. It knew kindness when it felt it. The biker snorted. What, you a dog lover or something? It's just an animal. Who cares? Keanu finally stood up, his full height making him seem taller than he really was. His expression remained calm, but his eyes, those sharp, piercing eyes, held a storm inside them. I care, he said simply. The biker chuckled, stepping forward, trying to intimidate. You really gonna fight me over some worthless mutt? Keanu didn't flinch. You don't get it, do you? His voice remained soft, but there was a dangerous edge to it now. That's not just a dog. He took a slow step closer, his gaze locked onto the biker. That's my dog. The smirk on the biker's face faltered for the first time. The people watching from the restaurant whispered among themselves, realizing who was standing before them. Some had already pulled out their phones, recording the unfolding confrontation. You're joking, the biker scoffed, though there was a flicker of doubt in his voice. Keanu remained silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, ever so slightly, he tilted his head. Do I look like I'm joking? The weight of those words settled heavily in the air. The biker's grin faded completely. He looked around, noticing the eyes on him, the phones recording. He wasn't just messing with some random guy, he had made a mistake. A big one. Keanu crouched again, lifting the little dog into his arms. The tiny creature relaxed against his chest as if it knew it was safe now. Keanu turned his attention back to the biker. You think being stronger gives you the right to hurt those who can't fight back? He shook his head, disappointment evident in his voice. That's not strength. That's weakness. The biker's face turned red, anger bubbling under his skin. You don't know anything about me. I know enough. Keanu's voice remained calm, but his eyes were sharp as knives. I know you think cruelty makes you powerful. But it doesn't. It just makes you small. The biker clenched his fists. The weight of shame, of the crowd's judgment, pressed down on him. He opened his mouth, ready to say something, but no words came out. He had been exposed. Stripped of the false power he had given himself, Keanu exhaled, his anger giving way to something softer, pity. "Walk away," he said quietly. The biker hesitated. Then, without another word, he turned and stormed off, pushing past the onlookers. Silence hung in the air for a moment before the crowd erupted into quiet murmurs. Someone clapped, then another, until the entire restaurant patio filled with applause. Keanu, however, wasn't paying attention to them. He looked down at the trembling dog in his arms, gently stroking its fur. "You're okay now, buddy," he murmured. A woman from the restaurant approached cautiously. "Mr. Reeves, is he really your dog?" Keanu glanced at the little animal, its big eyes staring up at him with trust. He hadn't known it before today. But looking into its scared yet hopeful gaze, he knew one thing for certain. He smiled softly. "Yeah. He is now." The restaurant owner rushed out with a bowl of water, placing it on the ground. Keanu knelt and let the little dog lap up the water eagerly, its tail wagging. For the first time since the incident, someone else approached, offering a leash and a small blanket. Keanu thanked them, wrapping the dog gently to keep it warm. The kindness of strangers never failed to amaze him. As he stood, he turned back to the crowd. "Thank you all for caring." His voice carried sincerity, warmth. "That's what matters. That we care." He looked down at the small bundle in his arms. "And that we do something about it." With that, Keanu walked away, the little dog safely nestled against him. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden hues across the city. The world was still filled with cruelty, but today, in this small moment, kindness had won. And for the little dog that had once been kicked to the ground, life was about to change forever. The sun dipped lower in the sky as Keanu walked through the quiet streets, the little dog still nestled safely in his arms. The tiny creature had stopped trembling, its warm body pressing against his chest as if it finally felt safe. Every now and then, Keanu stroked its fur gently, murmuring soft reassurances. He didn't know where the dog had come from, but he knew where it was going now, home. Keanu reached his car, carefully setting the dog on the passenger seat. He pulled out his phone, making a quick call. "Hey, it's me. Yeah, I need a vet." The drive was smooth, the little dog curled up on the seat beside him, exhausted but no longer afraid. As Keanu pulled up to a small veterinary clinic, he lifted the pup into his arms again and stepped inside. The receptionist's eyes widened when she recognized him. "Mr. Reeves?" Keanu gave a small nod. "He needs a checkup. I just found him." The receptionist immediately called the vet, and within minutes, a kind-looking woman in a white coat came out. She led them to an exam room, where she carefully examined the dog. "No fractures, just some bruising," she said, frowning. "Poor thing must have been terrified." Keanu exhaled, relieved. "Will he be okay?" The vet smiled softly. "With care? Absolutely." She glanced at Keanu, a knowing look in her eyes. "You're keeping him, aren't you?" Keanu looked down at the small bundle of fur, its big eyes staring up at him. The dog let out a soft, trusting sigh, resting its head on his arm. He smiled. "Yeah. I am." The vet nodded approvingly. "He's lucky to have found you." Keanu shook his head. "No," he said quietly. "I think I'm the lucky one." After getting the necessary medication and supplies, Keanu left the clinic, the dog now wearing a tiny collar. He glanced down at him. "You need a name, buddy." He thought for a moment, then chuckled. "How about Lucky?" The little dog's tail wagged. Keanu grinned. "Lucky it is." By the time they reached his home, Lucky was already more relaxed. Keanu carried him inside, setting up a soft bed in the corner. But as soon as he put him down, Lucky scampered after him, refusing to leave his side. Keanu laughed. All right. You win." He patted the couch. "Come on up." Lucky jumped up beside him, curling into a small ball. Keanu sat back, letting out a deep breath. Today had been unexpected, but maybe that's how the best things happened. By chance. As he ran a gentle hand over Lucky's fur, he couldn't help but think about how fragile life was. How easily someone could hurt another just for fun. But also, how simple it was to change that. A small act of kindness, a little bit of compassion, that was all it took. And tonight, as Lucky drifted into a peaceful sleep for the first time in who knows how long, Keanu Reeves knew one thing for sure: this wasn't just a rescue. It was the start of something beautiful. The night passed peacefully. For the first time in what was likely a long while, Lucky slept soundly, curled up beside Keanu on the couch. The little dog had no idea who his new owner was or how much his life had just changed. All he knew was that, for once, he was safe. Keanu woke up to the soft weight of Lucky still pressed against him. The little pup stirred, stretching out his tiny legs before looking up at Keanu with sleepy eyes. His tail thumped against the couch, and Keanu chuckled. "Morning, buddy," he murmured, scratching behind Lucky's ears. He stood up, stretching his stiff muscles. He had planned for a quiet day, but now he had something more important to do: help Lucky adjust to his new life. After a quick breakfast, he grabbed Lucky's new leash and collar. "Come on, let's go see the world." Lucky wagged his tail excitedly as they stepped outside. The morning air was crisp, the streets still waking up. They walked through a nearby park, where Lucky sniffed at every tree, every flower, every passing breeze. It was as if he was experiencing the world for the first time. As they strolled, a young girl approached, her eyes lighting up at the sight of Lucky. "Can I pet him?" she asked shyly. Keanu nodded with a warm smile. "Of course." Lucky hesitated at first but then slowly wagged his tail as the girl gently ran her fingers through his fur. "He's so cute," she giggled. "What's his name?" "Lucky." "That's perfect." She beamed, giving Lucky one last pat before skipping away to rejoin her parents. Keanu watched her go, his heart feeling lighter. Moments like these reminded him of the goodness in people, the kindness that still existed in the world. As they continued walking, Keanu couldn't help but think back to the biker. He wondered if the man had learned anything from what happened. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe he never would. But that wasn't what mattered. What mattered was that Lucky was safe. They spent the rest of the morning exploring, and by the time they returned home, Lucky was happily exhausted, curling up on Keanu's lap with a content sigh. Keanu ran a hand over his fur, his mind drifting. He had always believed that kindness had a way of coming full circle. Today, he was reminded of that once again. Lucky had been kicked, abandoned, left to fend for himself. But now, he had a home. A family. A future. And as Keanu sat there, feeling the gentle rise and fall of the little dog's breath, he realized something else. Maybe, in some small way, he had been saved too. The days that followed were filled with quiet moments of healing. Lucky, once timid and uncertain, began to show more of his personality. He was playful, affectionate, and full of life. Every morning, he would wake Keanu up by nudging his hand, eager for their daily walks. At night, he curled up beside him, his small body warm and trusting. Keanu found himself growing more attached to the little dog than he ever expected. He had always believed in the power of kindness, in the idea that the smallest actions could change a life. But he never imagined how much this tiny creature would change his own. One afternoon, Keanu decided to take Lucky back to the park. The sun was shining, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves. Lucky trotted happily beside him, his tail wagging. As they reached a bench, Keanu sat down, watching as Lucky sniffed the grass and greeted other dogs. Then, out of the corner of his eye, Keanu noticed a familiar figure, the biker, the same man who had kicked Lucky. He was standing near a group of friends, laughing as if nothing had happened. Keanu felt his jaw tighten, but he took a deep breath, reminding himself to stay calm. He had already dealt with the situation that night, there was nothing more to say, but then, something unexpected happened. The biker's gaze landed on Lucky. His laughter faded. His expression changed, shifting from amusement to something else, recognition. Keanu watched as the man hesitated, then took a slow step forward. "Hey," the biker muttered. That your dog?" Keanu looked down at Lucky, who was now sitting obediently by his side, his eyes wary but calm. Keanu met the man's gaze. "Yeah." The biker exhaled sharply, rubbing the back of his neck. He looked around as if making sure no one was watching, then spoke again, quieter this time. "Listen, I never apologized for what I did." His voice was rough, uncomfortable. "I was being an idiot. I don't know why I did it." He swallowed. Keanu studied him for a long moment, waiting. The man took a deep breath. "I'm sorry." Keanu didn't respond right away. He glanced down at Lucky, who was watching the man carefully, then, finally, he nodded. "That's not for me to forgive," he said simply. He reached down, running a hand over Lucky's back. "But maybe he already has." The biker's eyes flickered to Lucky, who, to Keanu's surprise, didn't cower or growl. Instead, he just stared, his little tail giving a single hesitant wag. The man let out a breath and nodded. "Take care of him." Keanu nodded back. "You too." And with that, the biker turned and walked away, his shoulders a little heavier than before. Keanu sat there for a moment, watching him go. He didn't know if the man would change. He didn't know if the apology meant anything. But maybe, just maybe, it was a start. Lucky leaned into him, letting out a soft sigh. Keanu smiled, scratching behind his ears. "Come on, buddy," he murmured. "Let's go home." And as they walked away, Keanu realized something. This wasn't just Lucky's second chance, that it was his, too.